All right, guys, so The View recently announced that they're having a hard time finding a conservative replacement for Meghan McCain. Right now, they're saying that the reason why they're having a hard time finding a conservative woman to replace Meghan McCain, even though they've had plenty on the show, right? They're saying, well, we don't want a conservative woman that's too hostile, right? Where she, challenges the liberals too much on their views, right? Or that is an anti-vaxxer, aka that's against vaccine mandates, right? So basically what they're saying is that they want a liberal Republican, right? They want somebody that calls themselves a Republican, but really has liberal views, right? Kind of like Meghan McCain, okay? That's what they want, right? So when I was reading about this, it kind of reminded me of the time that they got absolutely wrecked and stunned by no other than Dr. Ben Carson, right? Which is really the real reason, again, why they are having troubles looking for a conservative woman, because they don't want a conservative woman to do to them what Ben Carson essentially did to them in this segment when they were having a conversation about abortion, right? They don't want anybody that's going to come at them with facts and logic instead of using emotional arguments like they do throughout this whole conversation. And I really want to break down this conversation and talk about it because I think it is an important issue, and I think that the points that Dr. Ben Carson is bringing up here are so relevant to today's society and the issues that we're having, particularly with crime in this country. Okay. But before I get into this, I want to say something real quick about Dr. Ben Carson. I would like to see Dr. Ben Carson run for president again in 2024, right? I would not mind him throwing his hat in the arena. I think the man is incredibly intelligent, right? He is one of, if not the greatest neurosurgeons ever, right? And in a time in which the left is trying to give black people role models, right? People like George Floyd, criminals, they're trying to make black people look up to people like that. What they actually really should be doing is talking about people like Ben Carson, okay? Ben Carson should be getting a whole lot more recognition, right? He should be one of the main people talked about in the black community as somebody to look up to, because he is an example of what a successful black man looks like, that worked his way out of poverty through hard work, dedication, and personal responsibility. Okay. However, that's what Democrats and liberals hate, right? And Ben Carson is the antithesis of the victimhood mentality that they want to push on black people, right? That's why they smear and degrade people like Ben Carson, despite the fact that, again, the man is arguably the greatest neurosurgeon ever. Okay. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this conversation.
And one of the other quotes that we've sort of gotten from the research is that you sort of feel that there is not actually a war on women, but there may be a war on what's inside of women. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the babies. I mean, we're killing babies all over the place. And,
So you can already tell. They triggered, right? Look at Raven-Symone's face, right? She triggered, right? She ain't really liking what Ben Carson said, okay? You already know where this conversation is going.
We should be, I think people can probably understand. In my case, I spent my entire career trying to preserve life and give people quality of life, even operating on babies in the womb, operating all night long sometimes on premature babies. And I get to meet those people, when they're adults and productive adults. There is no way you're going to convince me that they're not important, that they're just a mass of cells and that you can do anything to them.
I want to ask you this. Have you met with the women who have to make these horrendous decisions when they have to make them of whether or not they can bring a child into the world?
Okay, so first off, Ben Carson, he gives you a flat out medical perspective. He said, listen, I'm a doctor. I have operated on children that are still inside of the womb. Okay, you cannot sit here and try to tell me that these children are simply just a clump of cells, right? That these babies are simply a clump of cells that you can just disregard, right? Because he's had that experience of interacting with those babies, right, in the womb, interacting with that life, okay? Now, again, that's a medical perspective, right? Whoopi, instead of challenging that, follows up with an emotional perspective. Well, have you talked to those women who've had to make that decision, in regards to having to go through pregnancy? And it's like, well, that's not really the argument that Ben Carson is making. He's making a argument about the sanctity of life, not about the woman themselves, okay? Because the truth of the matter is that if a woman doesn't want to have a baby, a child, then she should not get pregnant. And there are plenty of options and things we have out there to prevent women from having to even make that decision in the first place. You should never even get there. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later.
World. I mean, we talk about bringing children into the world all the time, but periodically, some women feel, I just can't. And are you empathetic to them? Because we
I'm
just
very
had
empathetic.
If you can't, right, then why are you getting pregnant in the first place? If you just can't bring a child in the world, then you should not get pregnant in the first place. It's really that simple.
Good. Go ahead. Sorry. Go
Very
ahead.
empathetic. And what I have said is that this is a job for us in the private sector. What we need to do is make sure that we provide adequate daycare centers for these mothers so that they can get their GED, their associate's degree, their bachelor's.
All right, so I do want to address this a little bit, because here's where I kind of agree with Ben Carson, but I kind of disagree with him as well too. I'm all for helping single mothers, right? That's essentially what he's getting at here. Get an education, get a GED, do what they got to do in order to gain some social economic mobility to take care of their kids. I'm all about that. However, in today's time, I'm not necessarily sure if we should be having government-run daycare do that for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons being the indoctrination that we're seeing going on in public schools among kids. We definitely don't want that starting any earlier than it's already starting, right? First and foremost. But then on top of that, again, like, it, in my opinion, kind of diverts the conversation away from the personal responsibility aspect, right? Why is it that these women are in this situation in the first place? Okay, where they have to make a decision about whether or not they want to keep a child or to have a child, right? When they should not be pregnant in the first place if you're simply not ready to have one. Now, Ben Carson is basically proposing that, hey, we need to rely on the private sector, right? And I'm assuming he's talking about, private daycares and stuff like that, which I don't have any issues with. In fact, I wouldn't even have an issue if the government said, hey, here's a voucher for daycare or whatever, like kind of like the whole school choice thing where there's a voucher system. I wouldn't have a problem with that for daycare. But what I don't want is government-run daycare taking care of babies, right? That's not what I want.
You're assuming that these are mothers who aren't educated. I mean, I'm talking about women who make that.
Let me tell you a fact. Let me tell you a fact. The fact is, a lot of those young girls who are having babies out of wedlock, when they have that first baby, they stop their education. And that child is 4 times as likely to grow up in poverty. We as a society have an obligation to do what's necessary to stop that cycle from occurring.
So how important is birth control?
Facts. Facts. Okay. So you guys notice that when Ben Carson is flat out speaking facts, he's basically saying, listen, who we're actually talking about when we're talking about these women that are having kids out of wedlock and getting all these abortions, we're talking about women that are likely to be living in poverty. In fact, those women that are living below the poverty line make up 50% of the abortions in this country. Over 50%. 50%. Okay? And we all know that there's a link between single motherhood and poverty. Poverty rate for single black mothers is about 30%. It was as high as 50% back in the 90s, right? Thank God it went down over time. And we also know that crime is also linked to single motherhood, right? And in fact, a state-by-state analysis by the Heritage Foundation indicates that a 10% increase in children living in single-parent homes leads to typically a 17% increase in juvenile crime, right? So crime is connected to single motherhood. And because 83% of women who get abortions are unmarried, basically what it means is that they're likely to be single mothers as well, okay? Because they put themselves in a situation where they were single and they got pregnant and decided to get an abortion in the first place, okay? And a lot of these single mothers again, like Ben Carson was saying, their education stops once they actually get pregnant. But what Ben Carson is actually really saying here, what he's saying is that that cycle of single motherhood and poverty that I just outlined with statistics and how it's connected, we have to stop that. The solution to stopping that is not increasing abortion and access to abortions, because we still have that cycle going on today with access to abortions. Obviously, that's not working. What actually needs to happen, and he didn't mention this in this interview, and I wish he did, is that we need to stop glamorizing single motherhood and start placing some responsibility and blame on these women that are choosing bad partners, right, and getting pregnant out of wedlock, which by extension means that we have to stop promoting and glorifying promiscuous sexual behavior by women, which is basically what the modern day feminist movement is, okay? Glorifying women being loose with their bodies, right? And going out here and, having sex with a bunch of men, sleeping with a bunch of men, and then not wanting to accept the consequences of what happens when you do that, right? The way they deal with their consequences is, hey, well, I should be able to get an abortion because, I can go out here and sleep with all these men, even though we have access to birth control and plenty of contraceptives in order to not get pregnant. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that in this next segment that's coming up.
Then to the Republican Party. They should be out there really applauding Planned Parenthood for supplying birth control, mammograms, and everything else.
Planned Parenthood does not supply mammograms, okay? This is a myth that's been busted a long, long time ago. Planned Parenthood does do wellness checks, women's wellness checks. I think they do breast exams, but they're not doing mammograms, right? And they do supply birth control, but a lot of reasons why they supply birth control is because it is good for their business, right? And the reason why is because these women, they get birth control, and women that live in poverty are less likely to actually use birth control, or they're more likely to misuse it, okay, use it incorrectly, and end up getting pregnant anyways, right? Lower income women are much more likely to experience an unintended pregnancy. So again, when you have a situation where these women aren't using birth control correctly, right, and getting pregnant anyways, and then you have this culture that is promoting this promiscuous sexual activity, this, there's no consequences to this because, hey, you can just get an abortion. This is what you have, right? You have a ton of women out here getting pregnant, some of whom have abortions, some of whom don't. A lot of them go on to have the kid anyways, and they're having kids, again, out of wedlock. They're becoming single mothers, thus promoting the cycle of poverty. Okay, all this stuff is interconnected, but it all starts with this idea that being a single mother is okay, and that it's okay to go out here and to participate in these activities that a lot of these women are participating in, and hey, there's no consequences to it because, hey, you can just get an abortion. But a lot of them don't, right? A lot of them don't, and they end up having kids anyways when they really shouldn't be having kids. And again, abortion is not really fixing the core problem, which is that these women should not be getting pregnant out of wedlock in the first place. It shouldn't happen. In the ideal society, it should be very rare to see a woman get pregnant out of wedlock. Okay, in the ideal society. But obviously, we're not living in the ideal society. And the Democrats are pushing us away from that, right? With a lot of what they're pushing, especially culturally, right? They want people to stay dependent on the government because that is how the Democrat Party maintains power, right? As long as you are dependent on them, okay, and you're dependent on the government, which a lot of these single mothers are, that keeps them voting Democrat, okay? Because you got to get your food stamps, you got to get your WIC, you got to get all the help from the government you need to take care of these kids that you shouldn't be having in the first place, right? Because you don't have a man in the house. And there's no incentive to have a man in the house because they know that the government's going to take care of them if they end up making a mistake. So yeah, there's an effort from the left to eliminate personal responsibility.
Why are they against Planned Parenthood? Are you against birth control too?
I don't speak for the Republican Party. I speak for me.
Okay, for yourself. Are you against birth control also?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right. And so I guess you believe in daycare centers and maternity leave and food stamps and all the things that go.
So before Ben Carson gets into that, the whole birth control thing, I'm not against birth control either. Okay, I think birth control it has some negative consequences in the sense that it does promote that risky, promiscuous behavior that a lot of women are participating in that we really should stop promoting. But when used correctly, it's very effective, right? It's very effective when used correctly, okay? And that comes down to personal responsibility, right? And what we need to start doing is teaching these women, hey, it's not cool to get pregnant at 16, 17 years old, right? When you absolutely cannot take care of a child, and that, if you're going to participate in these activities and these behaviors, then you need to make sure you're using this stuff correctly, okay? If you're going to participate, you shouldn't be participating at all. But if you do participate and you don't use this stuff correctly and you end up getting pregnant, there is no cop-out, right? There's no cop-out. And culturally, there's a few things that needs to change. One is this idea that, again, sleeping with a ton of men, random men, that's cool. Okay, that's somehow empowering for women. Because the women that are actually pushing this stuff, the Cardi B's of the world, the Meg, the Stallions of the world, they don't deal with the consequences of this type of behavior. One, because they're of a higher financial status. They have higher incomes, okay? And the men that they're dealing with, for the most part, of higher income. So even if they were to get pregnant and they become single mothers, they're fine, right? They're gonna be good, okay? But the women that actually have to deal with the consequences of the behaviors that they're pushing, that they're saying that it's okay for young women to participate in, they're the ones that have to deal with it because they're lower income, where they don't get the same benefit of the doubt. They're getting pregnant by deadbeats, okay? By men that don't have jobs, that sell drugs for a living, that can't necessarily pay child support, that can't necessarily provide for their kids. And these women themselves, because they're low income, they don't necessarily have job skills to go get good jobs to take care of themselves and their kids, okay? Because they definitely ain't learning those skills in high school, and a lot of these girls are getting pregnant before they even get out of high school. Again, and they're participating in this behavior because they're listening to the Cardi B's, the Meg Thee Stallions of the world, the feminists of the world telling you, oh no, it's empowering to participate in this type of behavior. It's empowering to be sexually promiscuous. And it's not, right? It's not. There are serious consequences to these actions. And a lot of that comes down to simply personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. And I just don't feel right in which people are personally irresponsible, and they think that, well, their cop out for being personally irresponsible is, well, I can just, get an abortion, right? I can take a life because I made bad decisions. That's not right. It's not moral, and that's not what we should be promoting as a society.
Along with raising a kid if you don't have the money.
Here's what I believe in, because I get sick and tired of people, particularly progressives, saying Carson grew up poor. He must have benefited from government programs, and now he wants to withdraw all the programs from poor people.
We did not assume
Wait a
that.
minute. I've heard that so many times. You've heard it too. It's a bunch of crap. And what I really actually want to do is provide people with a mechanism for coming out of a state of dependency and climbing the ladder and becoming part of the fabric of America.
This is a great thing.
They don't want to hear that, though. That's not what the progressive left wants to hear, because like I told you, they are incentivized to keep people dependent. That's how the Democrats get people's votes, right? That's why they love things like, abortion, Planned Parenthood. They love it because they know that these things, these institutions, keep women dependent on their party, okay? If you incentivize women to go out here and to be as sexually promiscuous as they want, they, can just, get abortions. If you get pregnant, a lot of whom don't actually go and get these abortions, they end up getting pregnant, having kids out of wedlock, not getting married. Yeah, that keeps them dependent on the Democrat Party, right? And a guy like Ben Carson, again, that comes along and says, listen, I grew up in poverty, right? And I worked my way out, okay? I went to school, applied myself, worked hard, and became a neurosurgeon. That should be the role model of basically every American, really. He should be the blueprint. He's the American dream. And we should be creating a society in which more people are able to do that, to pull themselves out, not to stay dependent. Just because you're dependent on the government and you might not necessarily be living in abject poverty, right? You may be able to provide, you may be able to feed your family, but if you're dependent on the government, then that doesn't mean you're better off. It just means you're dependent, right? That's what it means. Because a lot of people, these progressives think, well, the war on poverty worked because people technically, aren't living in poverty like they used to. Because they're able to feed their families, they're not starving. But again, they're not able to do it independently on their own. They have to do it with the help of the government, which doesn't make them any better off. Because at that point, they're not even incentivized to get off of the government teat. They're not incentivized to, because the more money they make, the better they do, then the government takes away the benefits. And a lot of people would rather just not work and just live off the government than actually work and have something on their own. Okay? Especially when they're trying to raise a bunch of kids. So, I think Ben Carson here is making a whole lot of points that these liberal women on The View don't want to hear. And they don't want a conservative woman on the show that's going to make similar points as Ben Carson. Yeah, so that's the gist of what I wanted to respond to in regards to that conversation that Ben Carson was having with those women on The View. Because I think he really brought up some excellent points that the left hates, right, in regards to personal responsibility and how a lot of issues in our society stems from single motherhood. Okay, whether you're talking about abortion, poverty, violence, crime, if you're talking about all these main issues that we talk about in society, a lot of it stems from single motherhood, and we don't talk about it enough, right? We don't point that stuff out enough. So I thought that conversation was fascinating. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.